All right. Greetings out there in the Beehyyve universe, in the Beehyyve world. This is Michael Tech and Strode. This is the Ujamaa Hour. Welcome to the July broadcast. We've come off a rousing month in June where we talked to Jamila Medley of the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance. And this month we're going to be speaking to Deon Lucas of E.G. Woode. So I want to give you all a few moments to get acclimated there in the comment section. Make sure you invite your friends to the session. Just go ahead and make sure you tag them, share the session, bring folks into the conversation. Throughout this dialogue, feel free to make sure that you're posting your questions into the comment section because we want to make sure that when we get near the end of the broadcast, we have an opportunity to field those questions and we don't want to have to sort of wait for the feed to catch up with the commenters. Yes, feel free to go ahead and make sure that as you have questions that are coming to mind, post them into the comment section. We'll make sure that we have a moment where we go ahead and get to those questions as we are able to later on in the broadcast. So we are here, 7:32. Let me just fix something here. I see, that I have not set my timekeeper, right? My faithful, loyal timekeeper here in the corner that keeps me accountable to making sure that I do not go overtime. One of the things that I am careful of, and one of the things that I do not like in broadcasts that I listen to is rambling. So, to make sure that I'm accountable, I won't ramble. I'll make sure that I keep time for myself here for you in the corner, and we can all together see that, when we hitting that 8:45 mark, we're a bit over time. So let me just fix that, and boom, we are in business. All right. So, entering into the Ujamaa Hour, the Ujamaa Hour is brought to you by the Cola Nut Collaborative and Beehyyve. Cola Nut Collaborative is Chicago's own time bank. Time bank being a time-based currency, so the ability for communities to map out the skills and assets that they have exist in their neighborhood, and then to think about what needs exist in the neighborhood, and think about how the skills that exist in a community and the needs that exist in that same community connect and intersect. So essentially, we're using time-based currency as an incentive mechanism to allow these communities to self-provision. What are the things that we need inside of our community, and how can we use this? How can we best allocate and locate the skills that are needed to address those needs? And then essentially, yes, using time to knit those things together. So a time bank is just an incentive mechanism. In the absence of financial capital, how can we locate and best utilize all of the other forms of capital that exist in our community? And one of the things that we talk about in this broadcast often is those 8 forms of capital: that financial, the financial, intellectual, living, material, cultural, experiential, social, and spiritual. So if we recognize that we have a community that has less financial capital, how can we best allocate and use some other types of capital in order to get our needs met? So that's what the Cola Nut Collaborative is working on. That's the initial experiment that we were working on, and now personally I've expanded to what's more of a community research and strategy function, which is there are several other innovative strategies beyond time banking that we can be using to address some of the problems and challenges that we're facing in our community, whether we're talking about things like revitalization of commercial corridors, whether we're talking about community and resident engagement, whether we are talking about employment and entrepreneurship challenges. There are other innovative strategies like the cooperative development that we've been talking about in this program, other innovative strategies like the permanent real estate cooperative that's being pioneered in East Bay, that we can use to improve the state and condition of our community, and do it in such a way where we don't essentially rely on a strategy that enables the accumulation of individual wealth, because ultimately the Ujamaa Hour, when we talk about cooperative economics, we're talking about something that extends beyond our ability to individually gain wealth, but how do we actually create wealth that is preserved in a community that is jointly owned, that is democratically controlled, that really creates a sort of social tie and a social fabric. We want to actually create wealth that is anchored in the community in such a way that it it is in service of the community for generations. So it's sort of institutional, and so that's something that we're talking about, and that's why we are committed to making sure that we really deeply unpack what cooperative economic strategies look like. We're deeply committed to making sure that we're unpacking those cooperative principles, and those are the things that we've been talking about thus far on the Ujamaa Hour. And, I hope that you have enjoyed the guests that we've had thus far. We've had a dynamite lineup throughout this period. So, some of the guests that were highlighted, if you've had an opportunity to read the sort of previous post, about the subject. When we talked about sort of last month, Jamila Medley of Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance. We've had Dara Cooper of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, La Tierra Pifus of Womanist Working Collective in Philadelphia. We've had Christina Brown of 400 Plus One and Counterbalance ATX out in Austin, Texas. So all of these are folks who are not simply creating community programs that have a black focus or a black lens, but they are actually programs that are thinking through how cooperative strategies, how jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprises can actually stabilize communities. With the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, they're doing that in thinking about how they're tackling food apartheid and creating equitable food systems. There are also conversations around how to do that with black land loss in the South. So there are several historical family lands that get piecemealed off effectively, and we don't have. There's not really a good strategy oftentimes for how to preserve that land. But National Black Food and Justice Alliance, Federation of Southern Cooperatives, there are entities that are thinking through strategies for how we can preserve that on a communal basis, so that it's not parceled off and that the wealth kind of slowly diminishes and is whisked away and moves out of the community. So these are the things, these are the conversations that we are having on the Ujamaa Hour. These are the strategies that we are thinking through, and these are the things that we want to bring to you throughout these conversations, throughout these dialogues, speaking to the people that are pioneering solutions in communities, and we hope to have more of those as we go forward. So one of the things that I want to do before I introduce tonight's guest is just kind of talk about some of the things that I'm working on presently. So I mentioned in the sort of recap introduction or paragraph here that I was going to talk about the Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Groups Worker Cooperative Curriculum Intro. So this 2 Sundays ago, we had our worker cooperative curriculum intro. And what we're doing at Cooperation for Liberation is we've had a year where we were working on studying the sort of historical and contemporary examples of cooperation in black communities. Of course, beginning where lots of study groups begin, which is with the fantastic text by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimbard, Collective Courage, which really has an encyclopedic understanding of what cooperation has looked like. And these are cooperatives that predate the sort of traditional historical arc of cooperation, where they root themselves in 1843 and the Rochdale cooperatives of England. But this is how communities that have been on the margins since arriving in this country have been able to think about cooperative strategies that will allow them to meet their mutual needs, meet their, service their mutual benefit, simply by figuring out how to pool resources, and also how to pool resources in a way that, again, those resources do not slowly leak out of the community, but that are actually in service of the community over a longer period of time. And so Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimbard charts, several historical examples of that, and none more famous than the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which have been working in the South for decades, to really think about how to knit together some of these small farm holdings and really allow them and enable them to meet their needs and get their products to market, and also just provide technical assistance for the things that they're faced with. If they're trying to figure out how to accumulate capital or how to accrue capital so they can get equipment, if they're trying to figure out how to collectively own equipment, this institution has been there as a body that's helping them to think through strategies for how to do those things. And that's exactly what cooperatives look like. They are joint holdings that are meant to meet the needs of their members, and those members are supposed to dictate the direction in which that cooperative goes, and what sort of services that they will actually need. So one of the things that I want to also mention is I had an opportunity to sit down, have a phone call with Daryl Newell of Seaway Self-Help Federal Credit Union, and the Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group had opened an account there at Seaway Self-Help. What we were looking for is an accountable financial institution, something that actually was in line with our values, and I suggested to the group that this might be such an institution, simply because it's difficult to really find a bank that really sort of has that has those remnants of that local value or local investment, because all of the smaller banks that used to exist in Chicago have been swallowed up by larger banks. But then also, if we're thinking about cooperation and cooperatives, why wouldn't we pursue a strategy of thinking about how to invest the funds that we had received from the Illinois Humanities into a financial cooperative where we can actually, again, think about investing our values, and really it offered an opportunity for us to extend the conversation out of this study and working group we had formed to start thinking about what are going to be the elements around in the ecosystem that we're going to build up, so that when we get to a point where we actually are pursuing the development of worker cooperatives, we have places that understand. So we're educating the environment around us as we are educating ourselves. And that's part of what is happening in this worker cooperative curriculum intro. So we're doing an introduction to the development of cooperatives. We're doing an introduction to the group dynamics that are necessary to form cooperatives, and we're really expanding upon the sort of educational space for cooperatives that exist in Chicago. Right now Chicago has a few cooperatives, but they kind of exist in silos. They don't really have a conversation with each other, and certainly in Black communities, it's really challenging to think about anybody who is really pioneering or pushing forward that cooperative model. I was fortunate to work for the 10-year stretch, with the Healthy Food Hub, which I still feel is one of the most dynamic food system development projects that has existed in the nation. I'm going to be a little bit less than humble in stating that, because I think that Dr. Jafunza Wright Carter and Baba Fred Carter are tremendous dynamic figures who were thinking through something that was sort of light years ahead of time. And it helped to kind of propel me to start thinking about how I can extend that economic conversation outside of the food hub and bring it into a larger space. So we've talked about Co-op for Lib. I've given a brief overview of the relationship with Seaway and self-help. And that conversation with Daryl Newell opened my eyes, because there are several things that Seaway is doing inside of the Chatham community, and lots of relationships that they're developing that I think are reasons why you want to consider banking there. You want to consider having some store of money there. You want to be in a relationship with that, because like a worker-owned cooperative, like a real estate cooperative, like a housing cooperative, a financial cooperative or a credit union is a place that is in service to its members. And the strategy that was laid out to me by Daryl Newell really spoke to that. He's really in conversation with the community and trying to figure out what's the best way that we can bring the legacy of this institution forward and then merge it with this notion of a credit union, so that so that members understand that you have a voice, you have a vote, and you are determining how that institution arrives, thrives, and moves inside of our community. So that was a great conversation with Seaway Self-Help. And then lastly, I'll just give a preview a bit. I am actually on a plane tomorrow heading over to Boston. I've mentioned before that I'm doing a cooperative development fellowship with Nexus Community Partners and Democracy at Work Institute. So Nexus Community Partners is out of St. Paul, Minnesota, which has a tremendous or a burgeoning cooperative ecosystem. I guess I probably shouldn't say tremendous, because folks who are living there are like, well, this isn't a lot, but compared to Chicago, St. Paul has a lot of cooperation happening, and the Twin Cities rather has a lot of cooperation happening, and a lot more. And so the Cooperative Development Fellowship has been an opportunity to explore some of these strategies as they exist in other cities. The Cooperation Works trip to Madison was another opportunity to think about how cooperatives are being formed in Madison and how they're operating, what are the challenges they're facing, and what it might look like to create an ecosystem for cooperatives here in Chicago. And so this trip to Boston is going to be an opportunity to see how Boston is doing that work, and how the Boston Ujamaa Project is pioneering a strategy to develop a community capital fund that then the community, in the same way that we're talking about a credit union being a place where members have a voice in how capital moves, the community capital fund would be a place in which each investor, each community investor, or the sort of they have several tiers of folks and ways that people can invest. But everyone who puts something into this community capital fund has the ability to dictate, what are the investments that it makes, what are the businesses that it invests in, what is the real estate or property that it invests in, and so they're really creating what they call that sort of capital ecosystem that will fuel the community revitalization, right? So they're creating an ecosystem for community revitalization that revolves around this capital fund. And if we have some time at the end, perhaps I'll shift over to the video that they have for the introduction. But that's what I'm going to visit tomorrow. So I'm taking this trip to Boston with the Cooperative Development Fellowship, and I'm really looking forward to bringing back some good insights from that. So that is the recap. I hope you are ready, because we're going to be talking to a guest tonight who is doing exactly what we're talking about here, developing a model that actually emphasizes the participation of multiple stakeholders in developing a real estate enterprise and providing technical assistances to businesses that are member owners of that enterprise. And certainly if there's anything that I've gotten incorrect, there'll be an opportunity for the guest to correct that. So our guest tonight is going to be Deon Lucas of E.G. Woode. Deon is a member and president of the development team at E.G. Woode, a low-profit, limited liability company and social enterprise whose mission is to stabilize underdeveloped communities and stimulate economic growth by enabling local entrepreneurs and business owners to collectively redevelop and better utilize the commercial and retail corridors in their communities. That's a mouthful, but it's a moment to pause, right? What does it look like to collectively redevelop and better utilize commercial and retail corridors? And how can that be a strategy that expands and emerges in other communities? How can other communities really think about that strategy? How can other communities replicate that strategy? And that's something that I'm looking forward to speaking with our guests tonight. Deon Lucas comes to the work with, a background in several distinguished design and architectural firms: Hanns Erving, Mofuji, Beehyyve, Smith & Smith Associates, Skidmore Owings Merrill, and everyone that I've spoken to about him, has certainly distinguished remarks to say of him. So I'm definitely looking forward to what comes of this conversation, and I will go ahead and shift over now and welcome Deon to the podcast. All right, so you are on the line, Deon.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
All right. So Why don't you start with just giving us a bit of your background and how you arrive at this place of developing E.G. Wood. So just kind of bring us up to the present moment.
Sure. I guess I'll start back in college. In college, when I went to Tuskegee, a lot of what they spoke about at the institution was building your surroundings, and that was how the organization or the institution was started. So the students built the school, and that was sort of their repayment or their tuition and participation in learning and acquiring knowledge. So that kind of stuck with me as I progressed throughout my career. Had opportunities to work at small and large firms and work on some interesting projects. But all the while, I felt like I was losing something. And I won't, go as far as say I was losing my soul. I think I was just losing the essence of what drove me to design, which was changing or modifying the fabric of my own community. And a lot of the projects that were given to me or bestowed upon me to work on were not impacting my community at all. And so when I had the opportunity to go to grad school and then leave, it was kind of an eye opener because I was almost forced to come back to the community in which I promised that I would return to, some 10 years prior to that. And it was good for me because I realized that those promises that I made, now it was the time to own up to them and to participate. So I started volunteering in Inglewood, and I began meeting and collaborating with a lot of individuals, some on the social activist side, political side, and of course the entrepreneurship side. And one day, the city put out a RFP for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, the Retail Thrive Zone. And me being a young architect with a business background, thought to myself, oh, this is my opportunity to sort of jump into the fold of the community from a business and design perspective. So initially, I don't want this to feel like, people think this was some altruistic business that we started. I was pursuing work, right? And I had a skill set of architecture and design with business in which I could assist entrepreneurs themselves in developing not only their business model, but a design platform, something that would be creative, reflective of them and their community, and would serve as sort of a beacon for those entrepreneurs. And what I did was I took it upon myself to go out and meet with 4 other entrepreneurs at the time and convince them, instead of applying as an independent group, to apply as a collective. And me, in my heart, I always enjoyed collective thought or collective movement. It's just always cool to have friends around you that are moving in the same direction. And I thought, why not do this in business? They agreed to it. We experimented with applying for the application. We verified with the city and the directors of the program, Summer Corps, if it was possible to do so. And they told us, hey, nobody's ever done it. We don't have anything against it. Go ahead and try, right? And so we applied as the Inglewood Thrive Zone Collective. And surprising to all of us, we all won the grant, right? And at that point, I kind of realized, this is the way we should be doing it everywhere. We should be organizing entrepreneurs, small businesses, just people, normal people from the community who have ideas and want to bring them to fruition, and applying and securing funding to do so. And as we started to formalize our structure, we decided that this wouldn't be a one-off project for us. We would take what we would learn, what we would experience, and what we would acquire, and we would offer it to other entrepreneurs who were in the same position as us, basically starting from nothing and hoping that one day I could own a business of my own. And really that was after that, that was the birth of E.G. Wood, which, E.G. Wood in and of itself is the essence of Inglewood. So that is the name, Inglewood. But what we wanted to do was sort of retain the essence of who we were and where we came from, but give people an opportunity to identify with it. And it's always easier to identify with a person or an idea or goal than it is a specific place, right? And that's for everyone across the world. So when like I'm a Tuskegee grad, when I say Tuskegee, it's not just the location, it's more about the experience, right? And I think that's what people often talk about is what was your experience at this school or that place or this institution. And what we want people to walk away with when they become or they're interested in NG is a great experience. Whether you fail or succeed, the goal is to experience failure, to experience success, because all too often in our communities we never get to experience the latter, right? And we don't even have the opportunity to fail because the opportunity never presents itself. And I've learned over my short career in architecture and design is that the failures make you who you are, especially when you succeed. And so that's been my journey. I mean, I'm very fortunate and very excited to be in a position where people are allowing me to, one, become a part of their lives and, come up with some very cool ideas and strategies and ways to move their goals and their visions forward, because that's all EG Wood is about. I mean, our sole purpose of existence is for the entrepreneur, for the small business. Everything else that we do is really just a byproduct of that.
All right, and why don't you just maybe unpack a bit of the business model? I had an opportunity while I was at the recent launch party. We were sitting on the couch in the back, and and then Felicia, is it? Your team member Felicia comes down and drops in, and then we got just when we asked about sort of understanding the model, so we certainly got more than we bargained for. I guess that's she manages a lot of the operation. So why don't you unpack the model for us and correct anything that I've said about your team member there?
Felicia plays a big role. She's been with us literally since we started, and it's weird because even those that have been with us since the start are still perplexed by how the model works. And that's not uncommon, right? And I'll admit there's some days when, someone will ask me a question and I'll give them an answer and I think, wow, that was awesome. Like, I didn't expect the model to be that, it's like growing into its own little organism and thing. And it's very hard to change it at this point. So it's very, I say it's simple. My team tells me that it's not so simple, but there's a few parts to it, right? And one of the biggest parts is control. So when we started out, we initially proposed a full-on cooperative, right? This is how we wanted to run it. This is how we wanted to operate it. And so we went out, we did some research, we brought in a lawyer, spent a lot of money there. And basically his response was, you can't do a cooperative. And we were like, well, why not? Well, because cooperatives can't raise money technically from outside investors. That person would have to be a direct participant in the service.
Oh, did you drop? Are you still there? Deon? Can you hear me, Deon?
Sorry about that.
Oh,
so that person or individual would have to be a direct participant in the cooperative, which it made us cry a little because we were very disappointed. We were so motivated to bringing this cooperative to life. And so what we did was we took an alternative approach. We thought about a hybrid organization. So is it possible to create I don't want to say, I'm going to say it, a capitalistic version of a cooperative institution? And we couldn't find anybody who was doing it that way, where you would merge sort of the goals and ideals of what capitalism is designed to do absent of the greed, and then the democracy and control of a one person, one voter type cooperative model. And what would those look like, right? And because we're using entrepreneurs as sort of the catalyst for that, we had to create a different version of a cooperative that suited our model best. And what we ended up doing was we split the voting. So the cooperative or the institution of E.G. Woode is like four parts. The first part is voting. So no matter how much you invest or how much you own, you still only receive one vote. So it's one person, one vote, one institution, one vote, one entity, one vote, et cetera, et cetera. The entrepreneurs who are local to the community, who own and operate a business as a member of E.G. Woode, own 51% of the voting rights collectively, and then all other parties, managers, investors, et cetera, have 49%. And that was to ensure that the people who are on the ground doing the work, advocating for the organization, always had control. Where it differs from the traditional cooperative model from a financial perspective is that all operations from real estate and any ancillary services, the profits from that minus, any operational expenditures go to the investors, that 49%. So essentially they receive 100% of all profits from operations of E.G. Woode. Then the third part is that the entrepreneurs, even though they are a member and they own E.G. Woode and we're providing them with additional services, including marketing, branding, strategy, operations, any consulting that they need, design, all of that comes as a member, right? That's your whole membership package. We don't own a piece of your company unless it's something you want to extend to the organization. So in essence, the investors who are basically investing in the real estate and the entrepreneur keep 100% of their profits there. And then the entrepreneur who benefits from the investment in that real estate, the debt that E.G. Woode assumes on their behalf, keeps 100% of the profits from their businesses. And it balances well because you're not mixing the ownerships and you're not mixing the goals and objectives of each party, right? Each party has something that they can fall back on if things go south, and each party has an exit that they can, take away from them if things go south. And so that's kind of the third part. The fourth part is that as a member owner of E.G. Woode, you've essentially graduated into a lifetime of service from the organization. So your membership fee, right, is basically through your leasing. So as you lease from E.G. Woode and you pay whatever is the lease amount, which is not tied to inflation for our business model, is actually tied. I mean, it's not tied to the market. It's actually tied to our operations. So if we only need to lease a building out at $1.50 per square foot, we would lease it at $1.50, even if the market says it's worth $5 a square foot. We're not tied to the market in any kind of way. That fee, that lease that you pay pays for all of the services that we will provide you as a member. And our goal is that if we can provide you with that service very heavily for 3 years, right? Hold your hand through that whole process and sort of build up your acumen and your understanding of how your business works truly. Then after that, our investment should pay for itself. Your business should thrive. And if you do hit some roadblocks, you still have us there to help boost you back up or maybe move you to another site that's much more beneficial to your business model. Some of the other parts of the model, and you can interject anytime you have a question, but some of the other parts of the business model is the actual equity and value of E.G. Woode. So what I really enjoy is the surprise on investors' faces when I tell them that your investment has no correlation to the value of any of our assets. And the look on their faces is like, what? That makes absolutely no sense. So let's say hypothetically, or actually, if you invested $100,000 in E.G. Wood, your investment of $100,000 is tied to the consumer price index, not the value of our assets or our real estate. What that basically means is that if an investor contributes 100 grand today, and 5 years from now, the inflation rate was 2%, they would only get a 2% value increase year over year based on their original investment. However, let's imagine we took that 200,000 and we leveraged it and we acquired assets upwards of 3 million. Well, that same investor's true value, if you want to look at it in the traditional capitalistic sense, if he owned 100% of that investment, is $3 million. Well, not with E.G. Wood. It's still 200,000 plus cost, plus whatever the inflationary rate was. So when you look at your ability to exit, it hurts investors more to exit E.G. Wood than it does to stay, because they are never reach the asset value versus the book value. And that actually helps us when we're selecting investors, because they become very cautious in knowing and understanding that this is essentially a lifetime investment. Like our goal with setting it up that way was for you to never extract any value from the company, besides the fact that we would pay you back in profits and dividends. And my goal is that one day your investment number is outweighed or unbalanced to whatever we pay you in a dividend. So my goal is if you've invested 100,000 in 5 or 10 years, I would like to pay you, $100,000 a year in dividends, which would essentially put you at more than 1,000.
There's a bit of a drop out there again, Deon.
Why would you sell if your value is much more than that of, what you have? So.
Absolutely. You dropped out just a bit at the end where you said if your investment is at 1,000, so there was a little bit of a break in the dialogue.
So if your investment is 100,000, and we made profits basically. So essentially, your profits could outweigh the value of your investment. So essentially, what I'm basically saying is that if you gave me $1, I would tell you over the next 5 years, your dollar will be worth $1.05. But every year during that 5-year period, I want to pay you $2 back. Yes. So your incentive to sell, meaning that if you sold, you have to sell it back to us. I'm only going to give you $1.05. But if you keep it, I'll give you $2 every year for the next 10 years. So you're disincentivized to sell as an E.G. Wood investor, which is great for us because we know that any investor that comes to the door is looking long term, specifically because a lot of their money is backed by an asset and not by some other means.
Yes. Okay. It's tremendous in hearing sort of the full scope of the business proposition there. Certainly, at full transparency, I sit amongst a lot of folks who are anti-capitalist, and being in conversation with activist spaces in that way, and certainly I myself have an aversion to the sort of extractive models. There was the misunderstanding of the model can make people look at it with a side eye, perhaps, I should say. And so it's definitely interesting to kind of really hear that you've developed a strategy here where you are really looking for money that has a mission, or folks who have that sort of commitment, and that's great. So I want to get at another question here, and this is more of perhaps maybe it's a social question, maybe it's an investor question, but you saw this particular corridor, this area that you wanted to develop. Why, in your estimation, was it not being developed? What was keeping other entities from picking up and doing something in the way that E.G. Wood is approaching it?
I think honestly it would be knowledge and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't blame it on the other institutions, because if you look out, if you just look at us, right? If that were the case, that these other institutions weren't ready to invest, then we wouldn't receive any money. I mean, we would be in the same boat as everyone else. I would say that a lot of the constituents of the community were not being given the knowledge that was necessary for them to build for themselves. And because of that restriction, or I would say starvation of knowledge, they weren't able to take the risk that we were, right? I'm not, I'm just a tool, right? I'm a conduit of what I've been instructed through the doors and walls of Tuskegee and University of Illinois, and my experiences in architecture, because of them, because those are the communities that gave me the 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 ability to persevere, right? And they all have it. Like, it's, you come into Inglewood or you go into North Lawndale or South Shore, any of these other communities, and there's so many smart, talented, interesting, wonderful people who are afraid to take a risk, not knowing that just being here is the biggest risk that you can take, and no one else wants to do that themselves. So any other risk outside of that really is a cakewalk. But they need someone there to sort of, you know, reposition them and say, hey, no, this is for you. This was built for you. You can accomplish this goal. So I would say the institutions themselves, they weren't deploying capital because the people that were there or are there weren't positioned the way that we should be to take those risks and to leverage that capital, to take it from them, take it out of their hands, put it into our hands. And so that's what we're trying to do at E.G. Woode. And I stress that a lot with our team members, is that you need to know how to be creative. You need to know how to take risks. These are things that you can teach, you can instruct, you can help build within a community. And our goal is to make sure that we build more of that. And that's why we take risks where a lot of other institutions aren't going to take risks, specifically because we know that's what got us here in the first place, and we know that's what will keep us moving in the future.
So switching lanes slightly, I've had an opportunity to sit with, while I was in Madison, Wisconsin, Gregory Jackson of the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. He visited with the group out there, Cooperation Works. He talked a bit about the model of what they're doing in East Bay, specifically the Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. For those who are listening, are working to they're enacting an affordable housing strategy that is working to pull land and housing off of the speculative real estate market and make it permanently affordable and democratic by holding it in trust inside of this permanent real estate cooperative. They're working on that strategy with San Francisco, or actually not the Oakland Community Land Trust, I want to say, no, Northern California. Well, they're working on with one of the many land trusts that exist in California, because there are plenty there. But essentially, they're working with the land trust to pull that land off of the market, create the permanent real estate cooperative, which will hold that land in perpetuity, and then deal with strategies for how to lease that back to folks who would like to live on the property, or who would like to purchase, and build a home on the property. So what I want to pose the question to you, Deon, is around E.G. Woode accumulates real estate for commercial use for these business entities. What's the sort of notion of maybe legacy or future or perpetuity? Are you all already thinking about this being an entity that holds commercial real estate for that long haul? Certainly unless up and until maybe you decide that you need to sell off a piece of property for whatever reason. But what's your strategy or thought towards sort of legacy for E.G. Woode?
So we're actually working on the legacy protocol, is what we call it. But part of that protocol is the accumulation and the continued affordability specifically of retail commercial real estate, right? And so one of the things we talk about in the Black community is Black wealth and Black homeownership, but we don't really talk about like Black commercial real estate, right? It's kind of like the lost child of what we do because we're so focused on finding people homes or getting them into homeownership. We don't think about the fact that a small business itself could generate enough capital from the operations within its own community to circulate money 20 times to create a dozen homeowners, right? And so what E.G. Woode is attempting to do is say, hey, let's put this real estate into a cooperative, and let's allow that cooperative to operate in a specific manner that is to the direct benefit of that entrepreneur. And those entrepreneurs would enjoy not only access to high value, low cost commercial real estate, but business strategies that will allow them to operate successfully so that they become a contributing member and hire well, right? And hire people for living wages and hire individuals that could buy homes or buy condos or whatever you may propose for them in acquisition and purchasing, and potentially purchase commercial properties in and around the areas that we impact. So our goal really is centered around the commercial corridors, and we hope that that has a direct impact on the housing corridors so that affordable housing truly becomes affordable because everyone in that community has the means to make an acquisition or not. Right now, we're struggling with it because they don't have the means. And affordable in our book it's relative, right? It's relative to the value or the work being compensated by an individual performing that work, which is why cooperatives are so wonderful because you already know, without a shadow of a doubt, that you're going to get your fair share, irrespective if the company's doing well or not. And so we want to create that same sort of strategy, but from an institution that controls the assets. And so part of actually being a member of E.G. Woode is that you're in our operating agreement, you're mandated to pay a living wage, right? So as a member, we're gonna say, hey, we're gonna charge you a lower rent on this commercial space, but that's not money just for you to put into your pocket to just bank and say, hey, now I'm a millionaire. It's like, no, now you have to pay a higher wage to your constituents, your stakeholders. And quite frankly, to me, we always say stakeholders when we think about, the people who are participating in the system, but they're your direct investors, right? They're your customer investor, and those are the people who are going to keep you in business. And that's our strategy, is to make sure that from a commercial real estate aspect that we're participating. When it comes to the long term, we don't intend to sell any of our assets off, but we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what or where we'll be even in the next 6 months. But our goal is to keep it because theoretically, if our business model works the way that we've designed it, our acquisitions should go up and your leasing should go down, because as we remove debt from the system and we no longer owe anybody any money, then we don't have to abide by the rules of a capitalistic market. We can abide by our own rules, which is, hey, if I owe $0 on an asset that's $10 million, and the market says that I need to charge this person $40 a square foot per year, and all my investors are looking for is a 5 or 10% return. All of our expenses are paid for because we have other ancillary things to make sure that happens. Our neighborhoods are doing well. People are getting paid well. Okay, we're just going to charge them $10 a square foot a year. That's enough. It's not our intention to exert any greed. And the other part is that the entrepreneurs can keep us in check because they already have the voting power to say, no, I'm not paying, an absorbent amount of rent because we can. Or they may, surprisingly, a lot of times we have votes and they go against what, you would think, a collective group would say, and they want to charge more to themselves. They feel like if we could contribute more, then maybe we can do more. So I'm excited just for the fact that, those individuals get to control, and they get to consciously control it, right? So we would think in some cases where if you tell people, hey, on the low end, you can pay this, on the high end, you can pay this. If you put all of the different options on the table for them and allow them to choose, they're going to choose the most sensible option that makes sense on both ends, right? They're not going to choose the one that's too high where they feel like they would struggle, but they're not going to choose the one that's too low where they feel like, okay, we're not going to make any gains. They tend to pick the ones that are slightly above mid-ground, and it benefits the entire crowd, but it also ensures that they have opportunities to grow. And we've seen it a few times in a lot of our strategy meetings where I would propose, hey team, we're going out. We have this property. We need to create a deposit, right, or a move-in fee. What should that deposit or fee look like? And they will struggle for like hours on trying to figure out, should we pay 1,000? Should we pay 200? And then they'll say, well, I would love to pay 200, but I know that's not going to get us anywhere. So maybe we should pay that. And that's the type of dialogue you need when you make those types of decisions. And I think that's what's really going to drive us forward, because the real estate, irrespective if we own it indefinitely, it's still being controlled by the entrepreneurs. So it's their game, it's their show.
Absolutely. All right, so I want to go ahead and just dive into the question section. I have my own, so I'm going to pair this question with one also about replication. So one of the commenters, Davine, who is a participant in Cooperation for Liberation, a participant, a decider, a co-facilitator, all of that, and a creative genius in her own right, out of Gary, Indiana. And if you know Davine, if you've ever had a conversation with her, she's asked you to move to Gary. So recognizing that there's lots of demands on your own calendar or the calendar of the folks at E.G. Woode. Davine is posing the question that do they consult outside of Chicago? If so, could they meet with business owners in Gary and do a site visit, or where are they interested in building? I would pair that with an opportunity for you to speak about what I've heard is a sort of South Shore replication or expansion. I'm not sure which is the correct phrasing or term for that. So if you could just respond there.
Sure. Yes, of course. We would love to, go to Gary and meet, commingle with some of the entrepreneurs there. Really, E.G. Woode is guided by the need of the communities that are seeking economic development the most. Our biggest responsibility is, one, identifying viable business models and entrepreneurs who we think are well suited for our model. So we're very heavy-handed, and so when you join us, we're like your grandparent, right? We are going to scold you and guide you and just put you in a position where we know you're going to succeed. And some people aren't really ready for that, right? They want to have a very independent way or autonomous way of operating, especially when they're starting out. And we know that's a higher risk, right? Most small businesses fail within their first 3 years. We can't afford that. We can't afford your failure. And then if we can afford your failure, we want to position you in a way that sort of mitigates a lot of those early risks, right? So if there are members in Gary, if there are members in Brooklyn, if there are members in Florida, we want to engage them and figure out ways and strategies to leverage what we've started to help those organizations and institutions there. As far as South Shore goes, our goal is really underserved communities across Chicago and to expand outward. And South Shore was brought to us by one of our newest members, Simeon, who does a lot of media and arts. And he's a South Shore native. He lives on, I think, like 75th and Luella or something like that. And he and I met maybe a few years ago. He does a lot of our videography. So all of the videos and things you see, that's him and one of his partners, Jan and me, that put those together. And he came to me and said, "Hey man, I want to do like something in South Shore. I want to put together this media and arts platform." And I honestly told him, like, I don't know what you've been waiting on. Like, we've been wanting you to be a part of what we're doing for a long time. And so immediately, my first thing is to jump on the real estate. I need to find a space for Simeon to run his operations. And then I immediately engage with him to figure out ways and strategies to build up his notoriety and business in South Shore. And what's cool about the model is that we now have, assets that we're pursuing in South Shore. We have assets that we're pursuing in North Lawndale. And I'm sure other communities will come online as we start, fanning out a little bit. They're all led by local entrepreneurs. These are people who love and who are just an integral part of their community. So it's I don't know how it's going to look, from like a social perspective, a political perspective, or just a communal perspective, but these new entrepreneurs are highly motivated, and I didn't really think when we started it that E.G. Woode would say, "Hey, we're going into this community," that we would be so accepted by them. But for them, it's an easy win, right? If you have an institution coming in that's bringing assets, capital, and then they're taking the brunt of the risk up front, and all you have to do really is put together your strategy and your business plan and make sure that you execute effectively. It's kind of hard to see people turning that away, right? And it's been a lot of fun just working with them, helping them build out their strategies. Because 90% of our businesses are startups, right? And I think I guess the craziest part is we are financed as a startup who are building startups, right? That's kind of unheard of. You've never seen a startup of startups reach the sort of level that we've accomplished in the last 18 months. And I think that's because not because of like the piece of people that are managing it necessarily, or even myself. I think it's specifically because of the mission, right? And the mission itself tells you what comes first. And those entrepreneurs, when they hear or they see or they envision E.G. Woode, it reflects them, right? And there are not a lot of organizations or institutions where a person feels like more than just emotion about it, but they have ownership, right? They feel like this is mine. I am E.G. Woode, and I think that is kind of what sets us apart from most people doing this type of work, specifically in the real estate industry.
All right, and in terms of you've had the launch party, you're still doing build out on the pilot, right? So you're preparing to launch them. Okay. And then so a moment ago you said that Simeon was a member. Just clarify for me, members are actively leasing properties, or are there other ways that folks can become members?
So the only way to be an owner member is to pay the membership fee. So there's a membership fee. It's $100,000, but we're not gonna send you out there in the world to collect $100,000. Mm-hmm. We actually identify grants and or private investors to compensate or pay that fee for you. And that fee is really just because we need some leverage, and we go to lending institutions and we borrow capital. So we would, Simeon's project will probably be well over $300,000-$400,000. And so we would need some upfront capital to operate, to acquire the space, do a lot of the design and upfront development, and then build it out, right? None of that of which he would be responsible for on the onset. And that's something that our members have taken pride in, right? They love the fact that they, can rely on E.G. Woode to pay their membership fee, right? Because we're going out and we're actively pursuing those opportunities. Did that answer your question, or did I miss something?
It does. I want to just because we've talked about in this program before for folks, the various cooperative principles. One of those principles being sort of member economic participation. So maybe balance out what you've just offered with how that member economically participates in that, helping to realize that membership fee for that project.
Okay, so the realization comes in the operations of your business, and so normally, let's take a venture capitalist, for instance. Mm-hmm. So if a VC came to you and said, hey, I'm going to offer you a service, typically that service comes with a catch, meaning they're seeking a certain percentage or ownership of your business. Well, we don't do that. So we're saying, hey, we're going to offer you this service. We're going to assume this debt. We're going to help you build out your space. We're going to help you become a successful business. But we don't want any ownership in your business, right? We want you to retain 100% ownership. And on top of that, we're going to try to make you as successful as any other person or any other entity doing it in that sector. And the goal is that is your repayment, right? That is your value, the fact that you don't have to learn how to develop inventory and management systems. You don't learn how to develop operational and HR policies. You don't learn you don't have to learn the ins and outs. We'll teach you, but you don't have to have a serious working knowledge of those things. And the other part is that you don't have to do them alone. So there's people like Felicia and Damola and all those people you met at the launch party. They are the ones who are spearheading a lot of this. We're just introducing you into teaching you some of those things so that you have a working knowledge and understanding. But you're not relying on yourself, which is in the case of most entrepreneurs, to go out and do it on your own. I mean, I think it would be practically impossible, which is why you haven't seen a lot of development on the retail side or the commercial side for our communities, because that one person trying to find money, find debt, build the business, maintain the customer relationships, build new relationships, it's very tough to do as a single individual. And so your benefit to joining E.G. Woode and reaping, an equitable or monetary value is that our goal is to build you into the best entrepreneur that you can be without exhausting yourself, to leave more time for you to do the things that you love doing, which is run and operate your business, and rely on us to do those things that we do best, which is to get you into business, right? To put you into that door. You would be surprised that, or maybe you wouldn't, but, when we first started, of course, there were a lot of skeptics, but there were people even on our own team who felt like, I don't think this is going to work because, we're a startup. I'm a startup. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. But because we had that extra weight of team members who focused on those things that no one else knew what to do, it was a lot easier to execute. And then people started seeing the benefits internally. So now their excitement level is much higher because they see that, hey, if E.G. Woode's taking care of this real estate, this design, and they're getting me in business, I'm turnkey ready as soon as I walk through the door. My furniture is there, my equipment is there, and I don't owe anything, and I don't have any debt. And all I have to do is operate my business. Day one, essentially, I should be able to start making money, right? Because I'm not worried about anything else but my lease. And that's not due because we do flexible leasing, for the first 30 days of your occupation in the space. So that's kind of the trade-off, right? And, some people love it and some people hate it because a lot of people want to own the real estate. But for us, it's like, well, independent ownership has kind of led us down this path where, if you take a block or city block in Chicago on a commercial corridor that used to be very prevalent, a lot of those businesses were independently owned by African-American, Black individuals. And then as one would drop off or they wouldn't pay their bills, because everybody else was in debt, they couldn't muster up enough capital individually to buy the asset that was vacant, right? Whereas if you pool your resources collectively, across Inglewood, across North Lawndale, South Shore, Greater Auburn Grisham, et cetera, then you have a greater mass and opportunity to make those acquisitions where normally we would lose the ownership of those spaces, and to immediately fill it with a local entrepreneur so that you don't, not only do you not lose the space, the city's not tearing it down or demolishing it or condemning it, but you're also you're rebuilding the equity of a local person, which keeps that money flowing within that community. So, I mean, those are the types of benefits we see. Some people see it from the entrepreneur's perspective, others don't. But I think as we start to grow and more people kind of realize the benefits of the model from an economic perspective, then they'll participate. And it'll be a lot easier for us to mobilize.
Absolutely, and certainly there's I was recently at the South Shore Work Summit, and one of the things that there was a presenter there from I think the Main Street Initiative, and certainly from their perspective, they're thinking about these commercial corridors, these main streets as ecosystems, and effectively, as you've noted, when one tree dies in an ecosystem, all the other trees suffer, and so definitely thinking about it from that perspective, recognizing that yes, you don't necessarily have to own that piece of real estate because E.G. Woode, you're also E.G. Woode is also focusing on the vitality of maybe a larger portion of properties in that same area, right? Is that how I'm understanding?
Yes. So very, very clustered, consolidated way of developing and kind of spreading out from there.
Absolutely. All right, and so there was a follow-up question about setting up a meeting or tour. I'm going to go ahead and just post the E.G. Woode a link to the E.G. Woode site in the comment section. Were there other ways that people can think about plugging in to either visit the site or other opportunities that might be coming up in the future? Other launch parties to meet the team, things like that.
We do have some other events planned, so we will have a grand opening where people can come and tour the site when it's wrapped up. In the meantime, if they want to email me, they can, dlucas@egwood.com. The other way really is just to stay connected and be supportive of what we're trying to do, spread the word, get people involved, I would say for the entrepreneurs, just start getting ready, right? Try as best as you can to educate yourself about the basic principles of business and how to run a startup, because once we move into your community, we want you, right? We want those individuals who are positioned and poised to develop to be members. And yeah, that's it for right now. We'll have another party soon.
Absolutely, and the parties for E.G. Woode come highly recommended. Make sure you play the Big Jenga set if that shows up, and also the
all
Big
day,
Connect 4. Big Jenga, Big Connect 4, and lots of goodie, lots of folks to talk to. I had an opportunity to meet a speaking coach there, and it was on a day when I had given a presentation on a landed housing toolkit that I was putting together for some folks on the West Side around who were trying to do affordable housing cooperatives, and I felt I'd spoken too fast during that presentation, and I got some quick tips right there in the middle of that session, and so it's an opportunity to meet folks, engage with folks, and talk to people who are passionate about this idea in the same way that you might be, and then also find other passions that you have in common. One of the other things that I'm posting in the comment section is the Blue Fund Rewards page. So announced at that launch party was the crowdfunding campaign. E.G. Woode has a $100,000 goal. At present, they've got 39 backers, and they've raised $5,040. And certainly there's more to come of that. You've heard the dynamic idea that is on the table here. It's transformative, it's game-changing, and it is certainly something that our community needs. It's a model that would allow not only the revitalization of some of this commercial retail space, but it's also really about revitalizing the an entrepreneurship sector, giving entrepreneurs an opportunity to focus on their businesses while E.G. Wood focuses on that commercial retail space and managing that real estate. All headaches that if you've even owned a home, you recognize that you probably don't necessarily want to deal with if someone else can deal with it, and if someone can deal with it in a responsible way. So those are all fantastic points. The last thing that I want to touch upon is on your Member Monday spotlight for the Resident Association. There was a line that strikes me as quizzical, as quirky at the moment. Just that this the person that we've had on our broadcast this evening in high school didn't think that college was an attainable goal. So, why don't you tell us some background on that? What was it in high school that had you challenged about college as an attainable goal, and then what kind of shifted you and pushed you over the edge?
So the truth, right? And I always try to tell the truth because it's hard for me to lie and maintain a lie. Is that when I was in high school, I was sort of like a hermit. I didn't go out. I lived on the west side. I'm from North Lawndale, East Garfield Park. I went to Westinghouse, Leif Erikson. I was, I'm a west side native. And growing up, it was very tough, right? Like just living in a neighborhood and always feeling like you don't fit in, right? Even when I joined the football team, people are looking at me like, you're not gonna make it, right? And so high school was one of those times where I didn't know what being intelligent or smart was, and I was the top male in my class. I graduated with like a 3.7 GPA, and I told my counselor one day in the hallway that I was going to join the Marines, and this was 2001, like literally a few months before we went to war with Iraq. And he told me, no, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to pursue architecture because you took drafting, you've been excelling, you won all these awards. I want you to go here. And he's handed me an application for Tuskegee. And I'll admit, I didn't even know what an HBCU was, right? And I filled out the application. I got a response. They gave me a partial scholarship, and then I was off to college. And what changed my mind was Dr. Blade, because he was the individual who put that application in front of me and told me that you are capable. This is where you need to be. I don't want you in the military. And I said, okay, because I didn't really have a father figure in my life telling me college is where you want to go. Most people were just saying, military, they'll pay for it. And then I got to Tuskegee, and it was like all black people, right? And it was a culture shock, not because it was all black people, because I expected one of the predominantly white institutions or a place where I would be cultured, and I'm using air quotes here. You can't see me. But it was the greatest experience of my life. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I met so many friends, and I still have those friends today. And it's the reason why E.G. Wood exists, because I learned there the value of hard work and dedication, especially from the people themselves. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And all of that culminates in a project, that is, again, transformative, game changing, and we get to benefit from the collective genius, so we won't necessarily force you to wear the genius mantle all on your own, well deserved as it might be, but we benefit from the collective genius that is E.G. Wood, and a strategy that our communities can greatly benefit from. So I'm just going to take a small commercial break to let everyone know that you have recently missed an edition on June 30th of the Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group. We hosted our worker cooperative curriculum intro that I mentioned in the outset, and at that point we were announcing that we're going to be launching a 6-month worker cooperative curriculum in which we'll be, again, going through group dynamics. We'll be doing exercises that talk about the stages of cooperative development. We'll be challenging ourselves to do some needs assessment in the community. So, what does it look like to actually do a mapping exercise in a community and think about what cooperatives could actually serve the specific needs that exist inside communities, and that drives that drives decisions around what you're actually going to be developing. And we'll just be going through these exercises, ultimately providing a space for cooperative education in Black communities that will allow us to really think about how this strategy can be put on some of the things that we're already doing. So there's some of these things that we're already working on, and we haven't necessarily had a cooperative toolkit to think about how it's applicable to some of the challenges that we're facing in our communities. As we've heard tonight, one tremendous challenge that I've seen in all of the quality of life plans from Lawndale from Lawndale and South Shore and Inglewood and, even in my area, South Chicago, we're all talking about, how we're developing retail in our community or how we're developing commercial corridors. And most of us fall back on that same anchor strategy. If we just get one big store, one really big store that'll put its footprint on our location, and we've seen that that's a failure with this sort of exit of Target. We want to make sure that we have other strategies that we can utilize, and E.G. Woode gives us a vision of another strategy, another way that we can think about how this development works. So come to Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group on July 14th. That'll be our first session of the cooperative curriculum, and that'll be an opportunity for you to meet some of the other participants, including the genius that is Davine, and who will tell you to move to Gary if you're a good person. And as well as some of my other collaborators there, and just really get into an understanding of what cooperatives look like, what the cooperative principles are, and give you another tool that you can use to imagine revitalizing your community. So with that, I want to thank our guest this evening, Deon Lucas of E.G. Woode. It has been a tremendous, conversation and dialogue. I really appreciate, you giving us the time this evening. Are there any closing remarks, anything we haven't touched upon that you would like to let our guests know about?
No, I just want to say that E.G. Woode, we're trying to position as the people's developer, right? I always make a joke about The Rock from WWE when he was in his prime there, and how he was like the people's champ. I really want people from our communities to own it, not figuratively, not any theoretical way, but in a literal fashion. And I think that's the only way that it's going to continue to thrive and be a competitor, right? We're still competing. We're still competing against traditionalism. We're still competing against people who pursue capitalism as a means to their end. And I think this is the tool that we can use for ourselves to make sure that our communities have a fighting chance to thrive in this world.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. And, so I thank you for your time this evening and bid you good night.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks a lot now, Deon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. That concludes this edition of the Ujamaa Hour. We've heard from Deon Lucas of E.G. Woode. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that you've picked up some tools that you can use to rethink and reimagine what could exist inside of our communities. And I really look forward to bringing you the next edition of the Ujamaa Hour, on which we shall have, give me a moment. Let me see if I can finally get the schedule, because, it's never happened, that I would get the schedule in the midst of a conversation. I am pasting into the comment section here. We're going to be having the next edition of the Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group. So I'm pasting into the comment section a link to the event page for that. It's going to be located at 1434 West 51st Street. That's at the Breathing Room. We meet from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. This first edition, we'll be acquainting ourselves with the cooperative principles and just really doing a sort of getting acquainted exercise. If you had an opportunity to participate in the curriculum intro, you know that one of the sort of first elements and one of the first stages of development of a cooperative is going to be getting acquainted and building trust. So really, that's what we'll be working on in that first session. And further on from that session, again, we'll be thinking about some of the other cooperative principles and discussing those. We'll be looking and examining models of how cooperatives exist in other communities, what problems other communities have been able to address using these cooperative models. And so we really look forward to having you at the Breathing Room on July 14th for that session. And yes, and with that, this is going to conclude the July edition of the Ujamaa Hour. Come back in August when, perhaps I'll finally know who the guest is. I do know, but no, look at that. And as I'm talking, as I'm rambling along, I finally get the guest list up. Yes. So for next month, August 12th, we're going to have Katrina Baxter of Soil Generation in Philadelphia. So another one of those Philadelphians, will be on the line. We've had Jamila, we've had La Tierra, Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, and Womanist Working Collective, respectively. So Katrina Baxter, another member from Philadelphia, is going to be joining us talking about soil generation, which was a participant in the 20 cooperative study groups, 20 cooperative businesses that Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance did. And so she'll be talking to us about some of the work that's happening in soil generation and what sort of enterprises they've been able to form inside of that entity. So that's going to be on for August. In September 9th, we're going to have Tara Hines of the Black Permaculture Network. In October 14th, we're going to have Richard Wallace of Equity and Transformation, recapturing a discussion we tried to have back in February. November 11th, we're going to have M. Hotep Adisa of Keperu Institute. And then capping off the year, December 9th, we're going to have Yaved Holtz of Cowrie Village and Bay Area Organization of Black-Owned Businesses, Baobab. So stay tuned. There is more to come on the Ujamaa Hour, and we really hope that you tuned in, and joining us throughout that process. I am way over my time, folks, so I'm going to get out of here because I have to go pack because I have to go to Boston tomorrow, and, I got to be out of the house at 10 a.m. I look forward to talking to you all again in August. Until then, peace.